Before they reached the end of the hallway, Berylane came hurrying out of the bright lights of the anteroom, clutching a thin white robe tightly around her with both arms. If the first of Mayan had been walking any faster, she would have been running. Bishop Aili could be as civil as she could possibly wish. Perrin swept a bow that he wagered even Mac could not have bettered. By contrast, Ail's curtsy was the barest nod of her head, the merest bending of a knee. He hardly noticed. As Berylane glanced past them, the smell of fear, rank and raw as a festering wound, made his nostrils twitch. Beside this, Torian's fear was nothing. This was mad panic tied with a frayed rope. He straightened slowly, staring after her. "Filling your eyes?" Ail asked softly. Intent on Berylane, wondering what had driven her so near the brink, he spoke without thinking.
Hey, White Tupac, how you doing? Thanks for stopping by, bro.
Torian suddenly stepped out of a side hallway to seize Berylane's arm. He was talking in Torrent, but Perrin could not make out more than a handful of scattered words. Something about her overstepping herself in her pride, and something else that seemed to be Torian offering her his protection. Her reply was short, sharp, and even more inaudible, delivered with lifted chin. Pulling herself free roughly, the first of Mayan walked away.
I'm not doing too bad, White Tupac.
On the point of
just chilling.
Torian saw Perrin watching. Dabbing at his nose with his handkerchief, the High Lord vanished back into the crossing corridor.
Chilling, listening to a book before I go to bed.
The essence of dawn, Ail said darkly. That one is not interested in hunting a bear. All her finest hind looked stretched on the wall. She wants the sun. He frowned at her. The sun? A bear? What are you talking about? You go on by yourself. I think I will go to my bed after all. If that's what you want, he said slowly. But I thought you were as eager to find out what happened as I am. I think not. I'll not pretend I'm eager to meet thee, friend. Not after avoiding it until now. And now I am especially not eager. No doubt the two of you will have a fine talk without me, especially if there's wine. You don't make any sense, he muttered, scrubbing a hand through his hair. If you want to go to bed, then fine. But I wish you would say something.
Yeah, definitely appreciate it, White Tupac.
For a long moment, she studied his face and suddenly bit her lip. He thought she was trying not to laugh. Sometimes I believe it is your innocence I enjoy most of all.
Hey, no problem, White Tupac.
Traces of laughter silvered her voice. You go on to your friend and tell me of it in the morning. As much as you want.
You got one of my brothers and most hated, so you might as well have one here too. One second.
Shaking his head, he watched until she turned into the stairs with no sign of Torian. Sometimes it was as if she spoke another language. He headed for the lights. The anteroom was a round chamber 50 paces or more across. 100 gilded lamps hung on golden chains from its high ceiling. Polished redstone columns made an inner ring, and the floor appeared to be one huge slab of black marble, streaked with gold. It had been the anteroom of the king's chambers in the days when Tyr had kings, before Archer Hawkwing put everything from the spine of the world to the Arithoshan under one king. The Tyran kings had not returned when Hawkwing's empire collapsed, and for 1,000 years the only inhabitants of these apartments had been mice tracking through dust. No High Lord had ever had enough power to dare claim them for his own. A ring of 50 defenders stood rigidly in the middle of the room, breastplates and rimmed helmets gleaming, spears all slanted at exactly the same angle. Facing every direction as they did, they were supposed to keep all intruders from the current Lord of the Stone. Their commander, a captain of the...
Well, he took he did that, taking a lot of people's wrench. He did that a while back.
The other on his hip, self-important with his duty.
It wasn't nothing that you did or anything. He just pretty much took a lot of them away that hadn't been there for a minute.
Or at least not tonight. Not in the next hour.
So it wasn't just you. There's a couple of people that he took from.
The officer started toward him, then hesitated when Perrin did not stop to be challenged. He knew who Perrin was, of course. At least he knew as much as any tyrant knew. Traveling companion of Aes Sedai.
Oh, right now?
to be interfered with.
roaches.
There was his apparent task of guarding the Lord Dragon's doors. But though he probably did not admit it even to himself, the officer had to know that he and his brave show of polished armor were simply that. The real guards were those Perrin met when he strode beyond the columns and approached the doors to Rand's chambers. They had been sitting so still behind the columns that they seemed to fade into the stone, though their coats and breeches, shades of gray and brown made to hide them at the waist, stood out here as soon as they moved. 6 maidens of the spear, Aiel women who had chosen a warrior's life over the hearth, flowed between him and the door.
And that, and I think
boots that reached their knees.
they got my brother
They were tall for women.
shadow band just
Tall,
because
barely a hand shorter than he, sun darkened with short cropped hair.
we do our smoke live, so it's involved in cannabis.
2 held curved horn bows with arrows.
He
drawn.
does, well, lately he does a lot more
Small high bucklers,
gameplay than we
3 or
do
4
our
short
smoke
spears
live,
each.
so
Short.
I don't see why they would still do that. But yeah, they shadow ban him because of
I do not think I can let you go in.
some of his content is cannabis related, so they decided to shadow ban him,
Show a great deal of any outward emotion for that matter. I
which
think
kind
he
of
does not want to
sucks.
see anyone tonight. I am going in, Bane. Ignoring her spears, he took her by the upper arms. That was when it became impossible to ignore the spears, since she had managed to get a spear point hard against the side of his throat.
Yeah, they're being strict, which I don't understand, and
Named Jihad
how
suddenly
YouTube's
had one of
always
her
been.
spears at the other side, as if the two were intended to meet somewhere in the middle of his neck. The other women only watched, confident that Bane and Jihad could handle whatever had to be done.
I guess actually demonetizing a lot of
I don't have time to argue with you.
channels that if you're smoking in them or
As I remember,
you have like cannabis related material on it,
as gently as he could,
yeah, they're
set her out of his way.
demonetizing some of
only
them.
needed her to breathe on it to draw blood, but after one startled widening of dark blue eyes,
No, that's usually just drinking ones.
would you like to learn a game of kiss, parent? You might play well, I think.
I'm not close to being monetized, so I'm not too worried about
One of the others
me smoking during these ones.
Jihad's spear point left his neck.
Cause I'm not even at
Breath, hoping they would
I'm not even at
pass his
500 yet,
since
so
the spears touched him. They had not veiled their faces. Their shufa lay coiled around their necks like dark
because
stars.
usually when I do these streams at night, for the most part, I usually don't smoke.
They were ready to.
Or if I do, I'll hit
Another time, perhaps.
the camera off. That way it still has the audio playing. And it's still going, but
was part of the humor.
they can't see me smoking.
A man could go crazy trying to understand women of any nation and any station in life.
I try to do that, but
As he reached for a door,
I'm not at that point yet where
Bane added,
I got to worry about being monetized. So
he has already chased out what most men would consider better company by far than you. Of course, he thought, pulling open the door. There, Elaine. She was coming.
oh yeah, White Tupac, you have a good night too, bro.
Revolving around. The first of Mayenne vanished from his thoughts as he got a look into the room. Broken mirrors hung on the walls and broken glass covered the floor, along with shards of shattered porcelain and feathers from the slashed mattress. Open books lay tumbled among overturned chairs and benches, and Rand was sitting at the foot of his bed, slumped against one of the bedposts with eyes closed, and hands limp atop Calidor, which lay across his knees. He looked as if he had taken a bath in blood. "Get Moraine!" Perrin snapped at the Aiel woman. Was Rand still alive? If he was, he needed Aes Sedai healing to stay that way. "Tell her to hurry!" He heard a gasp behind him, then soft boots running. Rand lifted his head. His face was a smeared mask. "Shut the door. Moraine will be here soon, Rand. Rest easy. She will..." "Shut the door, Perrin." Murmuring among themselves, the Aiel women frowned but moved back. Perrin pulled the door to, cutting off a questioning shout from the white-plumed officer. Glass crunched under his boots as he crossed the carpet to Rand. Tearing a strip from a wildly sliced linen sheet, he watered it against the wound in Rand's side. Rand's hands tightened on the transparent sword at the pressure, then relaxed. Blood soaked through almost immediately. Cuts and gashes covered him from the soles of his feet to his head. Slivers of glass glittered in many of them. Perrin rolled his shoulders helplessly. He did not know what more to do other than wait for Moraine. What under the light did you try to do, Rand? You look as though you tried to skin yourself, and you nearly killed me as well. For a moment he thought Rand was not going to answer. Not me, Rand said finally, in a near whisper. One of the Forsaken. Perrin tried to relax muscles. He did not remember tensing. The effort was only partly successful. He had mentioned the Forsaken to Faile, not exactly casually, but by and large he had been trying not to think of what the Forsaken might do when they found out where Rand was. If one of them could bring down the Dragon Reborn, he or she would stand high above the others when the Dark One broke free. The Dark One free in the last battle lost before it was fought. Are you sure? He said, just as quietly. It had to be, Perrin. It had to be. If one of them came after me as well as you, where's Mat, Rand? If he was alive and went through what I did, he'd be thinking what I did. That it was you. He'd be here by now to bless you out. Or on a horse and halfway to the city gates. Rand struggled to sit erect. Drying blood smears cracked and fresh trickles started on his chest and shoulders. If he is dead, Perrin, you had best get as far from me as you can. I think you and Loial are right about that. He paused, studying Perrin. You and Mat must wish I had never been born. Or at least, that you'd never seen me. There was no point in going to check. If anything had happened to Mat, it was over and done now. And he had a feeling that his makeshift bandage pressed against Rand's side might be what would keep him alive long enough for Moraine to get there. Yeah, it has gone on. Burn me, he's important too. What are you going to do if he's gone? Not so. Rand's eyes looked like morning mist covering the dawn, blue-gray with a feverish glow seeping through. His voice had a knife edge. That is what I have to do in any case. What everyone least expects. Perrin took a slow breath. Rand had a right to taut nerves. It was not a sign of incipient madness. He had to stop watching for signs of madness. Those signs would come soon enough, and watching would do nothing but keep his stomach tied in knots. What's that? He asked quietly. Rand closed his eyes. I only know I have to catch them by surprise. Catch everyone by surprise, he muttered fiercely. One of the doors opened to admit a tall Aielman, his dark red hair touched with gray. Behind him, the tired officer's plumes bobbed as he argued with the maidens. He was still arguing when Bane pushed the door shut. Rhuarc surveyed the room with sharp blue eyes, as if he suspected enemies hiding behind a drape or an overturned chair. The clan chief of the Tardat Aiel had no visible weapon except the heavy-bladed knife at his waist, but he carried authority and confidence like weapons, quietly, yet as surely as if they were sheathed alongside the knife. And his shufa hung about his shoulders. No one who knew the slightest about Aiel took one for less than dangerous when he wore the means to veil his face. That tyrant fool outside sent word to his commander that something had happened in here, Rhuarc said. And rumors are already sprouting like corpse moss in a deep cave. Everything from the White Tower trying to kill you to the last battle fought here in this room. Perrin opened his mouth. Rhuarc raised a forestalling hand. I happened to meet Berelain, looking as if she had been told the day she would die, and she told me the truth of it. And it does look to be the truth, though I doubted her. I sent for Moraine, Perrin said. Rhuarc nodded. Of course, the maidens would have told him everything they knew. Rand gave a painful bark of a laugh. I told her to keep quiet. It seems the Lord Dragon doesn't rule Mayenne. He sounded more wryly amused than anything else. I have daughters older than that young woman, Rhuarc said. I do not believe she will tell anyone else. I think she would like to forget everything that happened tonight. And I would like to know what happened, Moraine said, gliding into the room. Slight and slender as she was, Ruark towered over her as much as the man who followed her in, Lan, her warder. But it was the Aes Sedai who dominated the room. She must have run to come so fast, but she was calm as a frozen lake now. It took a great deal to ruffle Moraine's serenity. Her blue silk gown had a high lace neck and sleeves slashed with darker velvet, but the heat and humidity did not appear to touch her. A small blue stone suspended on her forehead from a fine golden chain in her dark hair flashed in the light, emphasizing the absence of the slightest sheen of sweat. As always when they met, Lan's and Ruark's icy blue stares nearly struck sparks. A braided leather cord held Lan's dark hair, gray-streaked at the temples. His face looked to have been carved from rock, all hard planes and angles, and his sword rode his hip like part of his body. Perrin was not sure which of the two men was more deadly, but he thought a mouse could start on the difference. The warder's eyes swung to Rand. I thought you were old enough to shave without someone to guide your hand. Ruark smiled, a slight smile, but the first Perrin had ever seen from him in Lan's presence. He is young yet. He will learn. Lan glanced at the Aielman, then returned the smile, just as slightly. Moraine gave the two men a brief, withering look. She did not seem to pick her way as she crossed the carpet, but she stepped so lightly, holding her skirts up, that not one shard of glass crunched under her slippers. Her eyes swept around the room, taking in the smallest details, Perrin was sure. For a moment she studied him. He did not meet her gaze. She knew too much about him for comfort, but she bore down on Rand like a silent, silken avalanche, icy and inexorable. Perrin dropped his hand and moved out of her way. The wadded cloth stayed against Rand's side, held by congealing blood. From head to foot, the blood was beginning to dry in black streaks and smears. The slivers of glass in his skin glittered in the lamplight. Moraine touched the blood-caked cloth with her fingertips, then took her hand back as though changing her mind about looking underneath. Perrin wondered how the Aes Sedai could look at Rand without wincing, but her smooth face did not change. She smelled faintly of rose-scented soap. At least you are alive. Her voice was musical, chill, angry music at the moment. What happened can wait. Try to touch the true source. Why? Rand asked in a wary voice. I can heal myself, even if I knew how to heal. No one can, I know that much. For the space of a breath, Moraine seemed on the point of an outburst, strange as that would have been. But in another breath, she was once again layered in calm so deep that surely nothing could crack it. Only some of the strength for healing comes from the healer. The power can replace what comes from the healer. Without it, you will spend tomorrow flat on your back and perhaps the next day as well. Now draw on the power, if you can, but do nothing with it. Simply hold it. Use this if you must. She did not have to bend far to touch Callandor. Rand moved the sword from under her hand. Simply hold it, you say. He sounded about to laugh out loud. Very well. Nothing happened that Perrin could see, not that he expected to. Rand sat there like the survivor of a lost battle, looking at Moraine. She hardly blinked. Twice she scrubbed her fingers against her palms as if unaware. After a time, Rand sighed. I cannot even reach the void. I can't seem to concentrate. A quick grin cracked the blood drying on his face. I do not understand why. A thick red thread snaked its way down past his left eye. Then I will do it as I always have, Moraine said, and took Rand's head in her hands, careless of the blood that ran over her fingers. Rand lurched to his feet with a roaring gasp, as if all the breath were being squeezed from his lungs, back arching so his head nearly tore free of her grasp. One arm flung wide, fingers spread and bending back so far it seemed they must break. The other hand clamped down on Callandor's hilt, the muscles of that arm knotting visibly into cramps. He shook like cloth caught in a windstorm. Dark flakes of dried blood fell, and bits of glass tinkled onto the chest and floor, forced out of cuts closing up and knitting themselves together. Perrin shivered as if that windstorm roared around him. He had seen healing done before, that and more, greater and worse. But he could never be complacent about seeing the power used, about knowing it was being used, not even for this. Tales of Aes Sedai, told by merchants, guards, and drivers, had embedded themselves in his mind long years before he met Moray. Rhuarc smelled sharply uneasy. Only Lan took it as a matter of course. Lan and Moray. Almost as soon as it began, it was done. Moray took her hands away, and Rand slumped, catching the bedpost to hold himself on his feet. It was difficult to say whether he clutched the bedpost or Callandor more tenaciously. When Moraine tried to take the sword to replace it on the ornate stand against the wall, he drew it away from her firmly, even roughly. Her mouth tightened momentarily, but she contented herself with pulling the wad of cloth from his side, using it to scrub away some of the surrounding smears. The old wound was a tender scar again. The other injuries were simply gone. The mostly dried blood that still covered him could have come from someone else. Moraine frowned. It still does not respond, she murmured, half to herself. It will not heal completely. That is the one that will kill me, isn't it? He asked her softly, then quoted, His blood on the rocks of Sheol Ghul, washing away the shadow, sacrifice for man's salvation. You read too much, she said sharply, and understand too little. Do you understand more? If you do, then tell me. He is only trying to find his way, Lan said suddenly. No man likes to run forward blindly when he knows there is a cliff somewhere ahead. Baron gave a twitch of surprise. Lan almost never disagreed with Moraine, or at least not where anyone could overhear. He and Rand had been spending a good deal of time together, though, practicing the sword. Moraine's dark eyes flashed, but what she said was, He needs to be in bed. Will you ask that washwater be brought and another bedchamber prepared? This one needs a thorough cleaning and a new mattress. Lan nodded and put his head into the anteroom for a moment, speaking quietly. I will sleep here, Moraine. Letting go of the bedpost, Rand pushed himself erect, grounding Callandor's point to the littered carpet and resting both hands in the hilt. If he leaned a little on the sword, it did not show much. I won't be chased anymore, not even out of a bed. Lan murmured. This time, even Rhuarc looked startled, but if Moraine heard the warder compliment Rand, she gave no sign of it. She was staring at Rand, her face smooth, with thunderheads in her eyes. Rand wore a quizzical little smile, as if wondering what she would try next. Theron edged toward the doors. If Rand and the Aes Sedai were going to match wills, he would just as soon be elsewhere. Lan did not appear to care. It was hard to tell with that stance of his, somehow standing with his back straight and slouching at the same time. He could have been bored enough to sleep where he stood, or ready to draw his sword. His manner suggested either, or both. Rhuarc stood much the same, but he was eyeing the doors too. Stay where you are. Moraine did not look away from Rand, and her outflung finger pointed halfway between Perrin and Rhuarc. But Perrin's feet stopped just the same. Rhuarc shrugged and folded his arms. Stubborn, Moraine muttered. This time the word was for Rand. Very well. If you mean to stand there until you drop, you can use the time before you fall on your face to tell me what occurred here. I cannot teach you, but if you tell me, perhaps I can see what you did wrong. A small chance, but perhaps I can. Her voice sharpened. You must learn to control it. And I do not mean just because of things like this. If you do not learn to control the power, it will kill you. You know that. I have told you often enough. You must teach yourself. You must find it within yourself. I did nothing except survive, he said in a dry voice. She opened her mouth, but he went on. Do you think I could channel and not know it? I didn't do it in my sleep. This happened awake. He wavered and caught himself on the sword. Even if you could not channel anything but spirit asleep, Moraine said coolly, and this was never done with spirit. I was about to ask what did happen. Theron felt his hackles rising as Rand told his story. The axe had been bad enough, but at least the axe was something solid, something real. To have your own reflection jump out of mirrors at you. Unconsciously, he shifted his feet, trying not to stand on any fragments of glass. And after he began speaking, Rand glanced behind him at the chest, a quick look, as if he did not want it observed. After a moment, the slivers of silvered glass that were scattered across the lid of the chest stirred and slid off onto the carpet as though pushed by an unseen broom. Rand exchanged looks with Moraine, then sat down slowly and went on. Perrin was not sure which of them had cleared the chest top. There was no mention of Berylane in the tale. It must have been one of the Forsaken, Rand finished at last. Maybe Samael. You said he's in Ilion. Unless one of them is here in Tyr. Did Samael reach the stone from Ilion? Not even if he held Kalimdor, Moraine told him. There are limits. Samael is only a man, not the Dark One. Only a man. Not a very good description, Perrin thought. A man who could channel, but who somehow had not gone mad. At least not yet. Not that anyone knew. A man perhaps as strong as Rand, but where Rand was trying to learn, Samael knew every trick of his talents already. A man who had spent 3,000 years trapped in the Dark One's prison. A man who had gone over to the shadow of his own choice. No. Only a man did not begin to describe Samael, or any of the Forsaken, male or female. Then one of them is here in the city. Rand put his head down on his wrist. I'll not be chased again. I'll be the Hound first. I will find him or her, and I will. Not one of the Forsaken, Moraine cut in. I think not. This was too simple and too complex. Rand spoke calmly. No riddles, Moraine. If not the Forsaken, who or what? The Aes Sedai's face could have done for an anvil. Yet she hesitated, feeling her way. There was no telling whether she was unsure of the answer or deciding how much to reveal. As the seals holding the Dark One's prison weaken, she said after a time, it may be inevitable that a miasma will escape even while he is still held. Like bubbles rising from the things rotting on the bottom of a pond. But these bubbles will drift through the pattern until they attach to a thread and burst. Light. It slipped out before Perrin could stop it. Moraine's eyes turned to him. You mean what happened to Rand is going to start happening to everybody? Not to everyone. Not yet, at least. In the beginning, I think there will only be a few bubbles. Slipping through the pattern the Dark One can reach through. Later, who can say? And just as ta'veren bend the other threads in the pattern around them, I think perhaps ta'veren will tend to attract these bubbles more powerfully than others do. Her eyes said she knew Rand was not the only one to have had a waking nightmare. A brief touch of a smile, there and gone almost before he saw it, said he could keep silent if he wished to hold it secret from others. But she knew. Yet in the months to come, the years, should we be lucky enough to have that long, I fear a good many people will see things to give them white hairs, if they survive. Mat, Rand said. Do you know if he... Is he... I will know soon enough, Moraine replied calmly. What is done cannot be undone, but we can hope. Whatever her tone, though, she smelled ill at ease until Ruark spoke. He is well, or was. I saw him on my way here. Going where? Moraine said with an edge in her voice. He looked to be heading for the servants' quarters, the Aiuman told her. He knew that the three were ta'veren, if not as much else as he thought he did. And he knew Mat well enough to add, not the stables, Aes Sedai. The other way, toward the river. And there are no boats at the stone's docks. He did not stumble over the words like boat and dock, the way most of the Aiel did, although in the Waste such things existed only in stories. She nodded as if she had expected nothing else. Perrin shook his head. She was so used to hiding her real thoughts, she seemed to veil them out of habit. Suddenly, one of the doors opened and Bane and Chiad slipped in, without their spears. Bane was carrying a large white bowl and a fat pitcher with steam rising from the top. Chiad had towels folded under her arm. "Why are you bringing this?" Moraine demanded. Chiad shrugged. "She would not come in." Rand barked a laugh. "Even the servants know enough to stay clear of me. Put it anywhere." "Your time is running out, Rand," Moraine said. "The Tyrants are becoming used to you, after a fashion. And no one fears what is familiar as much as what is strange. How many weeks or days before someone tries to put an arrow in your back or poison in your food? How long before one of the Forsaken strikes, or another bubble comes sliding along the pattern? Don't try to harry me, Moraine." He was blood-filthy, half-naked, more than half leaning on Kalendor to stay sitting up. But he managed to fill those words with quiet command. "I will not run for you either." "Choose your way soon," she said. "And this time, inform me what you mean to do. My knowledge cannot aid you if you refuse to accept my help." "Your help?" Rand said wearily. "I'll take your help, but I will decide, not you." He looked at Perrin as if trying to tell him something without words, something he did not want the others to hear. Perrin had not a clue what it was. After a moment, Rand sighed. His head sank a little. "I want to sleep. All of you, go away, please. We will talk tomorrow." His eyes flickered to Perrin again, underscoring the words for him. Moraine crossed the room to Bane and Chiad, and the two Aiel women leaned close so she could speak for their ears alone. Perrin heard only a buzz and wondered if she was using the power to stop him eavesdropping. She knew the keenness of his hearing. He was sure of it when Bane whispered back, and he still could not make out anything. The Aes Sedai had done nothing about his sense of smell, though. The Aiel women looked at Rand as they listened, and they smelled wary. Not afraid, but as if Rand were a large animal that would be dangerous if they misstepped. The Aes Sedai turned back to Rand. "We will talk tomorrow. You cannot sit like a partridge, waiting for a hunter's net." She was moving for the door before Rand could reply. Lan looked at Rand, as if about to say something, but followed her without speaking. Rand said, "We do what we have to." Rand did not look up from the clear hilt between his hands. "We all do what we have to." He smelled afraid. Perrin nodded and followed Ruark out of the room. Moraine and Lan were nowhere in sight. The tyrant officer was staring at the doors from 10 paces off, trying to pretend the distance was his choice and had nothing to do with the 4 Aiel women watching him. The other 2 maidens were still in the bedchamber, Perrin realized. He heard voices from the room. "Go away," Rand said tiredly. "Just put that down and go away." "If you can stand up," Chiad said cheerfully, "we will. Only stand." There was the sound of water splashing into a bowl. "We have tended to wounded before," Bane said in soothing tones. "And I used to wash my brothers when they were little." Ruark pushed the door shut, cutting off the rest. "You do not treat him the way the tyrants do," Perrin said quietly. "No bowing and scraping. I don't think I have heard one of you call him Lord Dragon." "The Dragon Reborn is a Wetlander prophecy," Ruark said. "Ours is he who comes with the dawn. I thought they were the same. Else why did you come to the stone? Burn me, Ruark. You Aiel are the people of the dragon, just as the prophecies say. You've as good as admitted it, even if you won't say it out loud." Ruark ignored the last part. "In your prophecies of the dragon, the fall of the stone and the taking of Kalendor proclaimed the dragon has been reborn. Our prophecy says only that the stone must fall before he who comes with the dawn appears to take us back to what was ours. They may be one man, but I doubt even the wise ones could say for sure. If Rand is the one, there are things he must do yet to prove it." If he is the one, he will know and do them. If he does not, then our search still goes on. Something unreadable in the Aielman's voice pricked Perrin's ears. And if he isn't the one you search for, what then, Ruark? Sleep well and safely, Perrin. Ruark's soft boots made no sound in the black marble as he walked away. The tyrant officer was still staring past the maidens, smelling of fear, failing to mask the anger and hatred on his face. If the Aiel decided Rand was not he who comes with the dawn, Perrin studied the tyrant officer's face and thought of the maidens not being there, of the stone empty of Aiel, and he shivered. He had to make sure if Aiel decided to leave. That was all there was for it. She had to decide to go, and without him. Chapter 4. Strings. Tom Merrilin sprinkled sand across what he had written to blot the ink, then carefully poured the sand back into its jar and flipped the lid shut. Riffling through the papers scattered in rough piles across the table, 6 tallow candles made fire a real danger, but he needed the light. He selected a crumpled sheet marred by an ink blot. Carefully he compared it with what he had written, then stroked a long white mustache with a thumb in satisfaction and permitted himself a leathery-faced smile. The High Lord Carleon himself would have thought it was his own hand. Be wary. Your husband suspects. Only those words and no signature. Now, if he could arrange for the High Lord Tadosian to find it where his wife, the Lady Altima, might carelessly have left it. A knock sounded at the door, and he jumped. No one came to see him at this time of the night. A moment, he called, hastily stuffing pens and ink pots and selected papers into a battered writing chest. A moment while I put on a shirt. Locking the chest, he shoved it under the table, where it might escape casual notice, and ran an eye over his small windowless room to see if he had left anything out that should not be seen. Hoops and balls for juggling littered his narrow, unmade bed, and lay among his shaving things on a single shelf, with fire wands and small items for sleight of hand. His gleeman's cloak, covered with loose patches in 100 colors, hung from a peg in the wall along with his spare clothes and the hard leather cases holding his harp and flute. A woman's diaphanous red silk scarf was tied around the strap of the harp case, but it could have belonged to anyone. He was not sure he remembered who had tied it there. He tried to pay no more attention to one woman than any other, and all of it light-hearted and laughing. Make them laugh, even make them sigh, but avoid entanglements. That was his motto. He had no time for those. That was what he told himself. I'm coming. He limped to the door irritably. Once he had drawn oohs and ahs from people who could hardly believe, even while they watched, that a raw-boned, white-haired old man could do backsprings and handstands and flips, limber and quick as a boy. The limp had put an end to that, and he hated it. The leg ached worse when he was tired. He jerked open the door and blinked in surprise. Well, come in, Matt. I thought you would be hard at work lightening lordlings' purses. They didn't want to gamble anymore tonight, Matt said sourly, dropping onto the 3-legged stool that served as a second chair. His coat was undone and his hair disheveled. His brown eyes darted around, never resting on one spot long, but their usual twinkle, suggesting that the lad saw something funny where no one else did, was missing tonight. Tom frowned at him, considering. Matt never stepped across this threshold without a quip about the shabby room. He accepted Tom's explanation that his sleeping beside the servants' quarters would help people forget that he had arrived in the shadow of Aes Sedai, but Matt seldom let a chance for a joke pass. If he realized that the room also assured that no one could think of Tom having any connection to the Dragon Reborn, Matt, being Matt, probably thought that a reasonable wish. It had taken Tom all of 2 sentences, delivered in haste during a rare moment when no one was looking, to make Rand see the real point. Everyone listened to a Gleeman. Everyone watched him. But no one really saw him or remembered who he talked to. As long as he was only a Gleeman, with his hedgerow entertainments, fit for country folk and servants, and perhaps to amuse the ladies. That was how Tyrone saw it. It was not as if he were a bard, after all. What was bothering the boy to bring him down here at this hour? Probably one or another of the young women, and some old enough to know better, would let themselves be caught by Matt's mischievous grin. Still, he would pretend it was one of Matt's usual visits until the lad said otherwise. "I'll get the stones poured. It is late, but we have time for one game." He could not resist adding, "Would you care for a wager on it?" He would not have tossed dice with Matt for a copper, but stones was another matter. He thought there was too much order and pattern in stones for Matt's strange luck. What? Oh, no, it's too late for games. Tom, did anything happen down here? Leaning the stones board against a table leg, Tom dug his tobacco pouch and long-stemmed pipe out of the litter remaining on the table. "Such as what?" he asked, thumbing the bowl full. He had time to stick a twist of paper in the flame of one of the candles, puff the pipe alight, and blow out the spill before Matt answered. "Such as Rand going insane, that's what." "No, you'd not have had to ask if it had." A prickling made Tom shift his shoulders, but he blew a blue-gray streamer of smoke as calmly as he could, and took his chair, stretching his gimpy leg out in front of him. "What happened?" Matt drew a deep breath, then let everything out in a rush. "The playing cards tried to kill me. The Amelin and the High Lord, and I didn't dream it, Tom. That's why those puffed-up jackdaws don't want to gamble anymore. They're afraid it will happen again. Tom, I'm thinking of leaving Tyr." The prickling felt as if he had black wasp nettles stuck down his back. Why had he not left Tyr himself long since? Much the wisest thing. Hundreds of villages lay out there, waiting for a gleeman to entertain and amaze them, and each with an inn or two full of wine to drown memories. But if he did, Rand would have no one except Moraine to keep the High Lords from maneuvering him into corners, and maybe cutting his throat. She could do it, of course, using different methods than his. He thought she could. She was Carianan, which meant she had probably taken in the game of houses with her mother's milk, and she would tie another string to Rand to the White Tower while she was about it. Mesh him in an Aes Sedai net so strong he would never escape. But if the boy was going mad already... Fool, Tom called himself. A pure fool to stay mixed in this because of something 15 years in the past. Staying would not change that. What was done was done. He had to see Rand face to face, no matter what he had told him about keeping clear. Perhaps no one would think it too odd if a gleeman asked to perform a song for the Lord Dragon. A song especially composed. He knew a deservedly obscure Kandori tune, praising some unnamed lord for his greatness and courage in grandiose terms that never quite managed to name deeds of places. It had probably been bought by some lord who had no deeds worth naming. Well, it would serve him now, unless Moraine decided it was strange. That would be as bad as the High Lords taking notice. I am a fool. I should be out of here tonight. He was roiling inside, his stomach churning acid, but he had spent long years learning to keep his face straight before ever he put on a gleeman's cloak. He puffed 3 smoke rings, one inside the other, and said, "You have been thinking of leaving Tyr since the day you walked into the stone." Perched on the edge of the stool, Matt shot him an angry look. "And I mean to, I do. Why not come with me, Tom? There are towns where they think the Dragon Reborn hasn't drawn a breath yet, where nobody's given a thought to the bloody prophecies of the bloody dragon in years, if ever. Places where they think the Dark One is a grandmother's tale, and Trollocs are travelers' wild stories, and Myrddraal rides shadows to scare children. You could play your harp and tell your stories, and I could find a game of dice. We could live like lords, traveling as we want, staying where we want, with no one trying to kill us." That hit too close for comfort. Well, he was a fool, and there it was. He just had to make the best of it. "If you really mean to go, why haven't you?" "Moraine watches me," Matt said bitterly. "And when she isn't, She has somebody else doing it. I know. Aes Sedai don't like to let someone go once they lay hands on them. It was more than that, he was sure. More than what was openly known, certainly. But Matt denied any such thing, and no one else who knew was talking either. If anyone besides Moraine did know. It hardly mattered. He liked Matt. He even owed him, in a fashion. But Matt and his troubles were a street corner rarity compared to Rand. But I cannot believe she really has someone watching you all the time. As good as. She's always asking people where I am, what I'm doing. It gets back to me. Do you know anybody who won't tell an Aes Sedai what she wants to know? I don't. As good as being watched. You could avoid eyes if you put your mind to it. I've never seen anyone as good at sneaking about as you. I mean that as a compliment. Something always comes up, Matt muttered. There's so much gold to be had here. And there's a big-eyed girl in the kitchen who likes a little kiss and tickle. And one of the maids has hair like silk to her waist. And the roundest... He trailed off, as if he had suddenly realized how foolish he sounded. Have you considered that maybe it's because... If you mention ta'veren, Tom, I'm leaving. Tom changed what he'd been going to say. That maybe it's because Rand is your friend and you don't want to desert him. Desert him? The boy jumped up, kicking over the stool. Tom, he is the bloody dragon reborn. At least that's what he and Moraine say. Maybe he is. He can channel, but he has that bloody sword that looks like glass. Prophecies. I don't know. But I know I would have to be as crazy as these tyrants to stay. He paused. You don't think Moraine is keeping me here, do you? With the power? I do not believe she can, Tom said slowly. He knew a good bit about Aes Sedai, enough to have some idea how much he did not know, and he thought he was right on this. Matt raked his fingers through his hair. Tom, I think about leaving all the time, but I get these strange feelings. Almost as if something was going to happen. Something momentous. That's the word. It's like knowing there'll be fireworks for Sunday, only I don't know what it is I'm expecting. Whenever I think too much about leaving, it happens. And suddenly I found some reason to stay another day. Always just one more bloody day. Doesn't that sound like Aes Sedai work to you? Tom swallowed the word ta'veren, took his pipe from between his teeth to peer into the smoldering tobacco. He did not know much about ta'veren, but then no one did except the Aes Sedai, or maybe some of the Ogier. I was never much good at helping people with their problems. And worse with my own, he thought. With an Aes Sedai close to hand, I'd advise most people to ask her for help. Advice I'd not take myself. Ask Moraine? I suppose that is out of the question in this case. But Nynaeve was your wisdom back in Emond's Field. Village wisdoms are used to answering people's questions, helping with their problems. Matt gave a raucous snort of laughter. And put up with one of her lectures about drinking and gambling and... Tom, she acts like I'm 10 years old. Sometimes I think she believes I'll marry a nice girl and settle down on my father's farm. Some men would not find it an objectionable life, Tom said quietly. Well, I would. I want more than cows and sheep and tobacco for the rest of my life. I want... Matt shook his head. All these holes in memory. Sometimes I think if I could just fill them in, I'd know. Burn me, I don't know what I'd know, but I know I want to know it. That's a twisty riddle, isn't it? I'm not certain even an Aes Sedai could help with that. A Gleeman surely can't. I said no Aes Sedai. Tom sighed. Calm yourself, boy. I was not suggesting it. I am leaving. As soon as I can fetch my things and find a horse. Not a minute longer. In the middle of the night? The morning will do. He refrained from adding, if you really do leave. Sit down. Relax. We'll play a game of stones. I have a jar of wine here, somewhere. Matt hesitated, glancing at the door. Finally, he jerked his coat straight. The morning will do. He sounded uncertain, but he picked up the overturned stool and set it beside the table. "But no wine for me," he added as he sat down. "Strange enough things happen when my head is clear. I want to know the difference." Tom was thoughtful as he put the board and the bags of stones on the table. Just that easily, the lad was diverted. Pulled along by an even stronger Taviran named Randolph Thor, was how Tom saw it. It occurred to him to wonder if he was caught in the same way. His life had certainly not been headed toward the Stone of Tyr in this room when he first met Rand. But since then, it had been twitched about like a kite string. If he decided to leave, say if Rand really had gone mad, would he find reasons to keep putting it off? "What is this, Tom?" Matt's boot had encountered the writing case under the table. "Is it all right if I move it out of my way?" "Of course. Go right ahead." He winced inside as Matt shoved the case aside roughly with his foot. He hoped he had corked all the ink bottles tightly. "Choose," he said, holding out his fists. Matt tapped the left, and Tom opened it to reveal a smooth black stone, flat and round. The boy chortled at having the first go and placed the stone on the cross-hatched board. No one seeing the eagerness in his eyes would have suspected that only moments before he had been twice as eager to go. A greatness he refused to recognize clinging to his back, and an Aes Sedai intent on keeping him for one of her pets. The lad was well and truly caught. If he was caught too, Tom decided, it would be worth it to help one man at least keep free of Aes Sedai. Worth it to make a payment on that 15-year-old debt. Suddenly and strangely content, he set a white stone. "Did I ever tell you," he said around his pipe stem, "about the wager I once made with a Domani woman? She had eyes that could drink a man's soul, and an odd-looking red bird she had bought off a seafolk ship. She claimed it could tell the future. This bird had a fat yellow beak nearly as long as its body, and it..."
Chapter 5. Questioners. They should be back by now. Egwene fluttered the painted silk fan vigorously, glad the nights were at least a little cooler than the days. Tyran women carried the fans all the time, the nobles at least, and the wealthy. But as far as she could see, they did no good at all except when the sun was down, and not much then. Even the lamps, great golden mirrored things on silvered wall brackets, seemed to add to the heat. What can be keeping them? An hour, Moiraine had promised them for the first time in days, and then she had left without explanation after a bare 5 minutes. Did she give any hint of why they wanted her, Aviendha? Or who wanted her, for that matter? Seated cross-legged on the floor beside the door, large green eyes startling in her dark tanned face, the Aiel woman shrugged. In coat and breeches and soft boots, Shufa looped about her neck, she appeared unarmed. Karine whispered her message to Moiraine Sedai. "I would not have been proper to listen. I am sorry, Aes Sedai." Guiltily, Egwene fingered the great serpent ring on her right hand, the golden serpent biting its own tail. As an accepted, she should have been wearing it on the third finger of her left hand, but letting the High Lords believe that they had 4 full Aes Sedai inside the stone kept them on their best manners, or what passed for manners among Tyran nobles. Moiraine did not lie, of course. She never said they were more than accepted. But she never said they were accepted either, and let everyone think what they wanted to think, believe what they thought they saw. Moiraine could not lie, but she could make truth dance a fine jig. It was not the first time Egwene and the others had pretended to full sisterhood since leaving the tower, but more and more she felt uncomfortable deceiving Aviendha. She liked the Aiel woman, thought they could be friends if they could ever come to know one another, but that hardly seemed possible as long as Aviendha thought Egwene was Aes Sedai. The Aiel woman was there only at Moiraine's order, issued for unspoken purposes of her own. Egwene suspected it was to give them an Aiel bodyguard, as if they had not learned to protect themselves. Still, even if she and Aviendha did become friends, she could not tell her the truth. The best way to keep a secret was to make sure no one knew who did not absolutely have to know. Another point Moiraine had made. Sometimes Egwene found herself wishing the Aes Sedai could be wrong, glaring wrong, just once. In a way that would not mean disaster, of course. That was the rub. Tanchico, Nynaeve muttered. Her dark, wrist-thick braid hung down her back to her waist as she stared out of one of the narrow windows, casements swung out in the hope of catching a night breeze. On the broad river Aranon below bobbed the lanterns of a few fishing boats that had not ventured downriver, but Egwene doubted she saw them. There is nothing for it but to go to Tanchico, it seems. Nynaeve gave an unconscious hitch to her green dress, with its wide neck that bared her shoulders. She did that a good deal. She would have denied wearing the dress for Lan, Moiraine's warder. She would have, if Egwene had dared make the suggestion. But green, blue, and white seemed to be Lan's favorite colors on women, and every dress that was not green, blue, or white had vanished from Nynaeve's wardrobe. Nothing for it. She did not sound happy. Egwene caught herself giving an upward tug to her own dress. They felt odd, these dresses that just clung to the shoulders. On the other hand, she did not believe she could bear to be more covered. Light as it was, the pale red linen felt like wool. She wished she could bring herself to wear the filmy gowns Berelain wore. Not that they were suitable for public eyes, but they certainly did appear to be cool. Stop fretting over comfort, she told herself sternly. Keep your mind on the business at hand. Perhaps, she said aloud. Myself, I am not convinced. A long, narrow table, polished till it glistened, ran down the middle of the room. A tall chair stood at the end near Egwene, lightly carved and touched here and there with gilt, quite plain for Tyr, while the side chairs had progressively lower backs, until those at the far end seemed little more than benches. Egwene had no idea what purpose the Tyrants had put the room to. She and the others used it for questioning 2 prisoners taken when the stone fell. She could not force herself to go into the dungeons, though Rand had ordered all of the implements that had decorated the guardroom walls melted or burned. Neither Nynaeve nor Elaine had been eager to return either. Besides, this brightly lit room with its clean-swept green tile floor and its wall panels carved with the 3 crescents of Tyr was a sharp contrast to the grim gray stone of the cells, all dim and dank and dirty. That had to have some softening effect on the 2 women and prisoners' rough-woven woolens. Only that drab-brown dress, however, would have told most people that Joya Bier, standing beyond the table with her back turned, was a prisoner at all. She had been White Aja, and had lost none of the White's cool arrogance on shifting her allegiance to the Black. Every line of her proclaimed that she stared rigidly at the far wall of her own choice, and for no other reason. Only a woman who could channel would have seen the thumb-thick flows of air that held Joya's arms to her sides and lashed her ankles together. A cage woven of air kept her eyes straight ahead. Even her ears were stopped up, so she could not hear what anyone said until they wanted her to. Once again, Egwene checked the shield woven from spirit that blocked Joya from touching the true source. It held, as she knew it must. She herself had woven all the flows around Joya and tied them to maintain themselves, but she could not be easy in the same room with a dark friend who had the ability to channel, even if it was blocked. Worse than just a dark friend, Black Aja. Murder was the least of Joya's crimes. She should have been bowed down under her weight of broken oaths, blasted lives, and blighted souls. Joya's fellow prisoner, her sister in the Black Aja, lacked her strength. Standing stoop-shouldered at the far end of the table, head down, Amiko Nagoyan seemed to sink in on herself under Egwene's gaze. There was no need to shield her. Amiko had been still during her capture. Still able to sense the true source, she would never again touch it, never again channel. The desire to, the need to, would remain, as sharp as the need to breathe, and her loss would be there for as long as she lived, saidar forever out of reach. Egwene wished she could find in herself even a shred of pity, but she did not wish for it very hard. Amiko murmured something at the tabletop. What? Nynaeve demanded. Speak up. Amiko raised her face humbly on its slender neck. She was still a beautiful woman, with large, dark eyes, but there was something different about her that Egwene could not quite put a finger on. Not the fear that made her clutch her coarse prisoner's dress with both hands. Something else. Swallowing, Amiko said, You should go to Tanchico. You've told us that 20 times, Nynaeve said roughly. 50 times. Tell us something new. Name names we do not already know. Who still in the White Tower is Black Ajah? I do not know. You must believe me. Amiko sounded tired, utterly beaten. Not at all the way she had sounded when they were the prisoners and she the jailer. Before we left the tower, I knew only Liandrin, Chesmal, and Rihanna. No one knew more than 2 or 3 others, I think, except Liandrin. I have told you everything I know. Then you are remarkably ignorant for a woman who expected to rule part of the world when the Dark One breaks free, Egwene said dryly, snapping her fan shut for emphasis. It still stunned her, how easily she could say that now. Her stomach still clenched, and icy fingers still crawled her spine, but she no longer wanted to scream or run weeping. It was possible to become used to anything. I overheard Liandrin that once, talking to Tamila, Amiko said wearily, starting a tale she had told them many times. In the first days of her captivity, she had tried to improve her story, but the more she elaborated, the more she had tangled herself in her own lies. Now she almost always told it the same way, word for word. If you could have seen Liandrin's face when she saw me, she would have murdered me on the spot had she thought I had heard anything. And Tamila likes to hurt people. She enjoys it. I only heard a little before they saw me. Liandrin said there was something in Tanchico, something dangerous to him. She meant Rand. She could not say his name, and a mention of the Dragon Reborn was enough to send her into tears. Liandrin said it was dangerous to whoever used it, too. Almost as dangerous as to him. That is why she had not already gone after it, and she said being able to channel would not protect him.
Alright, everyone, probably gonna call into this life right now and see if I can't lay down and get some sleep. But I want to thank everyone who comes by and keeps coming back and chilling with me. Definitely appreciate all y'all's support. Till next time, everyone, stay safe out there.